Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. Today we're diving into a research study that looked at how common SARS-CoV-2 is in pets.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, and the research was published in the Journal of the American Veterinary Medical Association.
Okay.
And what's really cool about this one is that they investigated, how common are infections in pets? And then what does that mean for interactions between animals and humans?
Oh, yeah, how are they connected?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a fascinating area to be looking at.
So this study followed 341 animals for over 17 months
Wow.
at Colorado State University's veterinary health system.
Okay.
And they collected samples from both pets belonging to clients and then also pets owned by the veterinary staff.
Interesting.
And get this, they didn't just limit it to like cats and dogs.
Oh, what?
They actually included 66 exotic animals as well.
Really?
We're talking rabbits, guinea pigs, ferrets,
Uh-huh.
even a tiger.
A tiger. Wow, that's impressive.
To detect if the virus was present, researchers used RT-PCR to look for SARS-CoV-2 RNA in nasal and oral swabs.
Okay, and an RT-PCR, that's like a really sensitive technique.
Right.
It can detect even tiny amounts of the viral genetic material.
Right.
Yeah, it's considered like the gold standard for diagnosing COVID-19 in humans, and it's been, adapted for animals too.
So did our furry friends show signs of the virus?
Well, their results were pretty interesting. They found positive results in 1.6% of dogs and 1.1% of cats.
Okay.
But none of the exotic animals, not even the tiger, tested positive.
Interesting. So those are relatively low numbers, but still, kind of interesting.
Right. It suggests that cats and dogs might be a little bit more susceptible to the SARS-CoV-2 infection than some other species.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
important to remember, though, that those percentages, those represent the animals that had like active infections when they were sampled.
Right.
So the researchers also looked at blood serum samples,
Right.
and they tested those for antibodies against SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah.
Because antibodies, they indicate that you've been exposed to the virus in the past, even if you're not actively infected anymore.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So did they find any evidence of past infections?
Well, yeah, you're leading me on here.
Well, yeah, they did.
Okay.
Actually, a much higher percentage of animals tested positive for antibodies.
Oh, wow.
12.8% of the dogs and 12% of the cats had these detectable antibodies,
Okay.
suggesting they had been exposed to the virus at some point. But again, none of those exotic animals had detectable antibodies.
So that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
A much larger portion of the cats and dogs have been exposed to the virus than were actually infected at the time.
Right. And that actually aligns with data from other similar studies, that have been done around the world.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it seems to be a bit of a pattern.
So they did more than just look for the virus in antibodies, right?
You got it.
They actually analyzed the virus itself.
Exactly. They took it a step further. They performed what's called next-generation sequencing on 2 of the positive canine samples to analyze the actual genetic makeup of the virus. This is a super powerful technique. It lets scientists determine the specific strain of a virus
Wow.
and track its evolution.
Okay, so what did they learn about the virus in those dogs?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Both samples were infected with subvariants of what's called the BA.5.1 lineage.
Wait a minute. Wasn't that the main strain going around in humans at the time?
You got it, exact. And it was in the same place as the study.
So this discovery kind of brings up a really important question.
Yeah.
About how this is spreading between species.
It really does. It makes you wonder, could these dogs have gotten it from their owners or other people?
Right. Or could it be something else entirely?
That's the burning question.
It's fascinating. We often think about diseases going from animals to humans.
Right.
But this suggests it could go the other way, too.
It really does. And it emphasizes just how connected human and animal health really are.
Yeah, especially during, a pandemic.
For sure.
We've covered a lot already, but we haven't talked about the limitations of this study yet.
Right.
And it's important to understand those before we jump to any conclusions.
Absolutely. Every study has its limitations, and it's super important to acknowledge those before we, start making any big pronouncements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So next time we'll dig into those limitations and what they might mean for these findings.
That's good. Welcome back. We left off talking about the methods.
Right.
So just to recap, they collected samples from 341 animals, over 17 months.
Yeah, pretty good sample size.
Yeah, for sure. It included client-owned pets and then, like we said, pets of the staff at the vet school.
Right, and they went beyond, the typical cats and dogs.
Yeah, they did.
They had 66 exotic animals, too.
Yeah, to really get a sense of how far-reaching this could be.
Right. Is it just cats and dogs, or is it
Exactly.
more than that?
They use that RT-PCR, remember, which is that technique that amplifies the genetic material from the virus.
So basically, they were looking for the virus's, like, fingerprint.
Yeah, basically, yeah, you got it.
Okay.
They focused on 3 genes in particular, the ORF1A, the N gene, and the S gene.
Okay.
Which are all, important for identifying this virus.
And then they tested for antibodies, too.
Yeah, they did.
To see if the animals had been exposed in the past.
Exactly. They looked at the blood serum to see if there were antibodies against SARS-CoV-2.
Gotcha. So antibodies were like the body's memory of past infection.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool.
And that way, even if the virus isn't there anymore, you can tell if they've had it.
What about those inconclusive results, though?
Oh, yeah.
What does that even mean?
So sometimes, tests aren't totally clear-cut. It could be because, like, the sample wasn't collected right.
Okay.
Or maybe it was really early in the infection or super late, or there could be some other reason.
Yeah, because science is messy.
It's not always black and white.
It's complicated.
Right.
So they actually did next-generation sequencing on 2 of the positive canine samples, just to be extra sure.
Oh, so they actually looked at the sequence.
Yeah, so not just, is it there, but what does it look like?
Right, like what variant are we dealing with here?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And that's how they figured out both those dogs had subvariants of BA.5.1.
Which is what was circulating in humans, too, at the time.
Exactly, yeah, in the same place.
So was it the dogs giving it to people or people giving it to the dogs?
Right, that's the real question.
That's the big mystery.
The study doesn't say for sure.
Okay.
But it definitely raises some interesting questions.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think.
It shows that we got to think about animal health when we're thinking about pandemic.
Right, they're not separate.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all connected.
We've talked about the methods, we've talked about the findings, but, we need to talk about the limitations of the study, too.
Right. Gotta be honest about those.
Yeah, every study has limitations, and it's really important to be upfront about those before we jump to conclusions.
Well, it's got to stay objective.
Yeah.
So next time, we're going to dig into the limitations that the researchers outlined and talk about what that might mean.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've talked about what they found, but now we got to talk about, the limitations of this study.
Right, every study has them.
Yeah.
So, one big one here is that they used what's called a convenience sampling method.
Okay.
Meaning they collected samples from animals that were already at the vet hospital for various reasons.
Okay.
So that might not be like a perfect representation of, all pets out there.
Right. So the animals in the study could have been more likely to have been exposed to SARS-CoV-2 just because they were, at the hospital.
Yeah, exactly. It's a possibility.
Okay.
Plus, they couldn't link the results to specific things about the animals.
Like what?
Like their age, breed, or if they had any other health issues.
Okay, so we don't know if, certain breeds were more likely to get infected, or if older animals had a stronger antibody response.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And they had to keep the samples anonymous.
Right, to protect the privacy of the animals and their owners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that limited, how much they could analyze the data.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What else? Oh, the study was only in one place.
Okay.
So what they found might not be true for other areas.
Right, because different places have different, populations, different climates.
Exactly.
Different pet ownership patterns.
Yeah, so the prevalence of SARS-CoV-2 and pets in other areas could be totally different.
Right.
And one more thing. They did this study between May 2021 and September 2022.
Okay.
So during that time, different variants were circulating.
Right.
So if they had done it at a different time, during a peak of infection, the results could have looked different.
Yeah. So it's important to think about when and where the study was done.
Exactly. It helps us, interpret the results properly.
Right.
So despite these limitations, what's the big takeaway here?
Yeah. Why should we care?
Well, it really emphasizes how important the One Health approach is.
Which is?
It's this idea that, human, animal, and environmental health, they're all connected.
Oh, right. We're all part of the same system.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens to animals can affect us and vice versa.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it's important to keep an eye on our pets, not just during pandemics, but all the time.
Right.
Just as part of, keeping everyone healthy.
Gotcha.
And this study really shows, how important it is to be a responsible pet owner.
So, what does that even mean?
Making sure they have good hygiene, keeping up with their vaccines, and taking them to the vet when they need to go.
Right. Being proactive.
Exactly. It protects them and it protects us.
Well, that's a good point.
So as new variants of, SARS-CoV-2 come out.
Right, because it's still out there.
It is, yeah. So it's important to stay informed, keep up with what the experts are saying.
Right.
And follow the recommendations.
Okay, good advice.
So this deep dive has given us a lot to think about,
Yeah, it really has.
We learned about how common antibodies are in pets, which was surprising. We talked about, could it spread between humans and animals?
The big question.
Yeah, the big one, and really how connected human and animal health are.
Right, and that we still have a lot to learn.
Oh, yeah, we do for sure.
But the research is continuing, and, the more we understand, the better we can protect everyone.
From Vet Neurojar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.